Hello, everyone, and welcome all of you to this very special episode of FB Live program done and conducted uh, jointly by Faith Bangladesh and Soch Gurgaon. I am Manish Samnani. I am an occupational therapist, and I, along with my wife Malvika, we both run a center here in Gurgaon called Soch for children with developmental difficulties. Faith also has a similar kind of a center with multidisciplinary, multidimensional perspectives, offering various services at Dhaka. Soch and Faith have joined together because we understand that the technology is something that binds us together, and not just technology. I would say between India and Bangladesh, I have traveled a couple of times now, and there are more similarities than we actually think. There's a huge sense of commonality between the language, the culture, the overall way the children are, overall way the parents are. And as far as children with development difficulties are concerned, you will actually see a lot more alignment, a lot of commonality of the spirit, the overall commonality of the challenges and the positives and the war that we have to make sure that our children develop and grow as much as possible. In the same lines, today we have an most eminent personality in the field of autism. She is an autism spokesperson. She is an autism advocate. She's herself on the autism spectrum. She's somebody who was included as the Women Hall of Fame in 2017. We, on behalf of all of you who are here in this program, on behalf of Faith Bangladesh and Soch, I welcome Temple Grandin in this live program. And today she would be accompanied with another eminent personality who is also a person who is in the autism spectrum himself. He was somebody who was recommended institutionalization when he was very young, and he, along with the kind of support that he got, today he is a professor of special education. Temple Grandin, of course, you all know, she doesn't need any introduction. I think the 2 hours will be short if I start with the introduction. I think what I found about her, and I have been reading about her right from my days of doing undergraduate program, and she's an amazing person, an amazing speaker. She's a problem solver. She's somebody who is right there as a support system for the global fraternity of parents and children around the world. Welcome, Stephen Shore and Temple Grandin, both of you. Today, Temple will be starting with a short presentation, followed by Stephen Shore's presentation, and then we will take up some Q&A. So welcome, Temple, and it's all yours now.
Well, thank you very much. It's really wonderful to be here. When I was a little kid, I had no speech. I didn't get speech until I was 4 years old. Today, I am a professor of animal science at Colorado State University. I design livestock handling facilities. I've done this all around the world. I've had a really active career. I'm still working on it. Now, if you have a little child, 2, 3, 4 years old, that's not talking, I don't care what the diagnosis is. No matter what the diagnosis is, you need to start working with that child now. The worst thing you can do is let them sit in a corner and rock, zone out, play with electronics, or just, no. Got to work with them every day. So when I was a young child, I had a speech therapist who taught me words. And when the grown-ups talked really fast, it sounded like blah, 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 gibberish. But when people slowed down, then I could hear them. Like my speech therapist would hold up a cup and she'd go, cup. That's a cup that came from Brazil. She'd say cup, and then she'd say cuppa, where she'd enunciate the hard consonant sounds, like the C and the P. So teaching me words for things. The other thing you've got to do with these little kids is you have to give them time to respond. I like visual analogies, and one really good visual analogy is on the reason why the response time is so slow is these kids are like a phone with just one bar of service. It takes time for that phone to download the web page. You've got to give the child time to respond. Another thing that was part of my therapy as a very young child was teaching me how to take turns. Maybe you might have a child that's lining up little blocks. Well, let's turn that into a turn-taking game where I line up a block, then the child lines up a block. And some of the best people to work with these children would be grandmothers in the community. You've got to, be resourceful, get out there in the community and find some older grandmothers. A lot of grandmothers know how to work with kids, to work with these little kids. And what I have observed is that some grandmothers have sort of the ability to do this, and some don't. Because you have to just kind of push a bit. You have to be gently insistent going into their world. But you got to work with them. 20 hours a week, one-to-one, working with them, with an effective teacher. Okay, what is an effective teacher? More speech. They also have to learn skills, dressing, washing their hands. Then as they learn to speak, you teach them things like saying please and thank you, teaching them social skills. They've got to learn skills. They've got to learn use the toilet, learn how to bathe. These are the basic skills. And when kids are very small, I looked very severe when I was 3, very severe. And you work with a child, some of them like me, you can kind of pull them out of it. Others remain nonverbal. But some of the individuals that remain nonverbal can learn to type. Text messaging on a tablet. And there's plenty of ancient old computers around, phones around. Or they could just tap it out on a piece of cardboard. They can learn to type. Another thing I want to talk briefly about are the sensory issues. Loud noise hurt my ears. And when the school bell went off, our school had a very loud bell that hurt my ears. If a child's afraid of a hairdryer or some other noisy thing, maybe a vacuum cleaner, one of the ways to help them get over that is to let the child control the noisy thing, whatever the noisy thing is. If the child can turn that noisy thing on and off where they control it, they might actually get to like the noisy thing when they have the control. Some kids will wear a headset all the time to block out sound. It's okay to have the headset, but the problem is if they wear it all the time, their ear will get more sensitive. But give them control by saying, okay, you can wear the headset, have it with you, but try not to wear it all the time. Sensory problems are real. So when you're working with the young children, some kids you can kind of get in their face, and make them pay attention. That worked with me. But I want to warn you, there are other individuals that if you do that, you will drive them into sensory overload and you'll make no progress because they will go into sensory shutdown. They're very variable. Some kids have hearing sensitivity. Others might have visual sensitivity. I did not have visual sensitivity. But if a child has visual sensitivity, he may not be able to use certain old computer screens that flicker because they can see the entire screen flickering on and off like a strobe light. And these sensory issues are extremely variable. Now, I know people have heard about my squeezing machine. I was one of the individuals that responded to deep pressure. Some individuals find deep pressure over wide areas of the body really calming. Others don't. You see the deep pressure works for some, and for others it doesn't work. Now, simple ways to do deep pressure would be a weighted vest, a weighted blanket. These are things that are easy to make, and they work best if you put it on for 20 minutes and then you take it off. And one of my best books is The Way I See It. It's a lot of little short chapters, The Way I See It. It's available electronically, so it should be easy to get. Has a lot of little short chapters. You don't have to read the whole thing. It's my most basic book. It'd be good for anyone that's working with young nonverbal children. I don't care what diagnosis they have. The therapies are pretty much the same. And you need to get the grandmothers in the community. You got to work with these kids. So that's the end of my formal comments. And then Stephen Shore's got some comments. And then we're going to just open up everything for questions. One other thing, develop a child's strengths. I am a visual thinker. If you watch the HBO movie Temple Grandin, it shows how I think visually. I see pictures in my mind. Another kind of kid might be very good at mathematics. It's a different kind of thinking. And the mathematics kid needs to be given harder math. My kind of mind needs to be encouraged in art. Also, a lot of people with my type of mind, visual thinking, are very good at mechanical things, fixing motorbikes, for example. They'd be very, very good at that because they can visualize everything on how a motorbike works. They could be the best motorbike mechanic around. And that's a skill that other people want. Even if somebody's nonverbal, if they can fix motorbikes, people are going to hire them. So develop the strength that they're good at. Others are good writers. Take the thing the kid is good at and then try to turn it into a career. Learning work skills. There's all kinds of places. You can go into little market stalls and a child could help out with one of the vendors and start learning how to work outside the home. That's another big problem I see is kids are not learning work skills. When I was a teenager, I took care of the horse barn. And I was in charge of the horse barn, basically, when I was 15. And that taught me work skills. That needs to start young, chores around the house. There's all kinds of opportunities with merchants just in the town where they could be a job where they help stock shelves or, help out and learn some work skills. Develop their strengths. Okay, Steve, it's all yours.
All right, Temple, this was a great introduction into the importance of early intervention. And I think one word that is important to keep in mind is the idea of diversity. Yeah. And that is there is huge diversity within the autism spectrum. And as Temple was saying, some of us will be math geeks, computer geeks, others will be artists, some will be musicians, and it's important to find that ability. And the reason why is because one characteristic of autism that's not often mentioned is the widely varying skill set. And what that translates to is that the things we're good at, we're incredibly good at. The things we're not good at, well, there's a lot of challenges. And often there isn't much in the middle. And that shows up formally in assessments such as an IQ test, where you'll see some subtests are in the 99th percentile and other subtests will be like in the 10th or the 5th percentile. So for me, like Temple, the doctors recommended institutionalization. But fortunately, my parents, like Temple's mother, and we see so many parents today, increasing numbers of parents in Bangladesh and India, advocating for their children. And my parents said no, and they took me home. And they convinced the school to take me in about a year. And it was during that year that my parents implemented what we would today refer to as an intensive home-based early intervention program. And this was a program that emphasized music, movement, sensory integration, narration, imitation. And that's just today's terminology. In those days, the concept of early intervention didn't even exist. So what did my parents do? And it was mostly my mother. Well, first she tried to get me to imitate her. And imitation is a time-honored educational strategy. It works most of the time. But for us autistic people, we may have difficulty with imitation. So she flipped it around. And then she imitated me. So if I was flapping, she was flapping. If I was making some sound, some strange sound, she made it too. And what she did is she used that to create a relationship. She came into my world, and then she pulled me out. And that is what worked well for me. So if we look at today's approaches, it probably looked more like one of the developmental approaches we have today, such as the Miller method, or floor time, or RDI, or also many elements of what is used in daily life therapy at the Boston Higashi School. So with the work that my parents did, speech began to return at age 4. We often hear about the incredible strengths and interests that autistic people have. And for me, my parents found me taking apart a watch with a sharp knife at age 4. I would pop open the back, extract the motor, take out the gears, spin them around. We love things that spin. Put it all back together again. The watch still worked, and there weren't any pieces left over. So incredible fine motor control to take apart a watch. But where does that fine motor control go when it comes to penmanship? And that's an interesting question that occupational therapists have to work with. And while there are some neurological hints as to why this happens, what it does describe is the sharp lines of delineation that we see between ability and the disabilities that autism can give us. So while it is important to use a strength-based approach, to be asking the question, what can the autistic person do? We also have to be mindful of the challenges, because if those challenges didn't exist, we wouldn't be here trying to figure it all out. So they must be addressed. And we can look at them as barriers that need to be torn down so that the person can be successful in using their strengths. So back to my parents. Instead of taking the watches away because it was kind of a strange thing to do, they soon provided all kinds of other devices to take apart and to put back together again. They made a big deal about my taking apart objects and being able to get them together again. And that's important because many autistic people are not aware of what their strengths are. And by making us aware of our strengths, that helps build a sense of self-determination. Being able to make good adult decisions based on our profiles, our strengths, and our challenges. So I went to that school that initially rejected me at age 4. I got reevaluated. Instead of being considered a psychotic and ready for an institution, I got upgraded to neurotic. So things were looking better in the world. And then it was on to regular school kindergarten at age 6, where I was a social and academic catastrophe. So like Temple, I was bullied for being different, for being weird, by repeating things over and over. I didn't get called a tape recorder like Temple, but I suppose I could have been, because I would repeat things and I would make odd sounds that I heard from the environment. That is how I interacted. However, I had my highly focused interests. So even though I was a grade behind in most of my subjects, the thing I enjoyed about school, in addition to the structure, was that I could go into the library, get all the books on whatever I was interested in. And it might have been astronomy, it could have been weather, electricity, earthquakes, volcanoes, whatever it was. I'd read them. I'd take notes, copy diagrams, read them again and again, then bring them back to the library and get a book on books on different subjects. And I remember thinking in grade school, isn't there more to school than sitting in the back of the room, reading my favorite books? I'm very happy to do it, but shouldn't I be reading in groups or doing math with others or something? And I think what it translated to is that teachers didn't know how to reach me. But at the same time, since I wasn't a behavior problem, they just left me to my own devices. And in those days, it was probably for better rather than for worse. In 3rd grade, I had a stack of astronomy books on my desk. And the teacher told me that I'd never learn how to do math. But somehow I figured out just enough math to teach statistics at the university level. These days, increasing numbers of educators would notice a special interest like this and find a way to teach mathematics through astronomy, through the highly focused interest, and working with as opposed to against the autistic characteristics. And an example of that might be, suppose we have a child who is having difficulties in math, but they live to use a flight simulator on a computer. And commonly we might think, okay, the flight simulator is a powerful reinforcer. If you do your math for 20 minutes and you do what you need to do, then you get the flight simulator as a reinforcer for the last 10 minutes. However, that's kind of working against the characteristics. I think what might be better is to find ways to teach mathematics through flying airplanes, because that's an interest. And now mathematics becomes intrinsically reinforcing. There's no reinforcer that you have to apply later, and then eventually you have to fade that reinforcer. You have the makings of possibly someone who's going to be the
Totally
best
agree.
airplane
Totally
mechanic
agree.
in the US. And another area that's also important to consider is employment. And the road to employment begins with chores around the house, and that's what Temple was talking about. And so that means making the bed, feeding the animals, taking out the trash. And if you have someone who's significantly affected and isn't able to do the whole chore, you teach it piece by piece. So we begin by putting the pillow where it belongs, and then we teach the other parts of making the bed, and eventually glue the whole thing together, you chain it together, and finally you have the complete chore. Temple often talks about the need to have outside employment by middle and high school, and that is something that I did. I had a paper route. A paper route was an excellent business, a complete business in miniature. It's kid-sized. You have the responsibility of needing to do it every single day, whether you want to or not, and you have to perform at a certain proficiency so that you keep your customers and you don't lose them. These days, not too many people are delivering papers, but there are other ways that people can make money outside of the house. Where I lived and where Temple lived, it would snow in the winter, and that was great because school would be canceled, and I would go out with a shovel slung over my shoulder, and I'd spend the day shoveling snow for people and come back with a good chunk of money doing so. So building that work ethic.
Another thing is common, walking dogs.
Yeah.
There's things you can find in the neighborhood. I'm sure in Bangladesh and India, there's a lot of small vendors in the market, and there would be plenty of employment opportunities for a kid to just help out in one of those shops. We just got to find things in the neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I would completely agree. And we are, in a way, it is an area which is still to be developed in this regions of the world. That the go out and work vocational aspects are still not very well developed and researched, actually, because it has to be something specific to our culture as well.
Absolutely, yes. So there's, for example, if I was born in Bangladesh or India, one thing that I've noticed in both countries is that there's often these little bicycle repair shops that are set up on the side of the road. And you see somebody with a bicycle that's upside down and they're changing a flat or something. And if I could have gotten involved in that, that would have been great, because in middle school, bicycles also became a highly focused interest. And I got it to a point where I could take a bicycle apart down to the ball bearings and get that back together again. And speaking of middle and high school, well, you don't need to be autistic to have difficulties in middle and high school. But for me, it was actually easier for two reasons. One, I figured out that using words instead of sound effects from the environment really helped with social interaction. And then two, I was able to engage in my focused interest of music. And now I had a structured activity to mediate my interactions with others. So those specials classes, as they call them, music, shop, art, physical education, these are often courses where autistic people and others with differences can excel, even if they fall flat in academics. So I got so fascinated with music that I got it into my autistic head that I needed to learn how to play all the instruments. And I'd spend hours in the instrument closet, figuring out the different instruments, taking them apart, of course, recombining them in ways where there'd be three instruments combined into one and should never have seen the light of day. And then when I heard that a requirement for a degree in music education in college was that you had to learn all the instruments, well, what could be better? And that's exactly what I did. And I got my bachelor's, master's, and all of my doctoral coursework in music education. And just before I was starting the dissertation, I got more interested in autism. So I defected to the School of Education and got my degree in special education. And now, as Manish mentioned in the introduction, I am now a professor of special education at Adelphi University. Pre-pandemic, I was traveling the world to about a different country every month to talk about autism and writing books on the subjects. I have a number of books, not as many as Temple, but I got some, including my book Beyond the Wall, which is just about completely finished with its translation to Bangla. So that should be available soon. And here I am talking to you and talking with Temple. And in closing my part of the presentation, I think it's important to be aware of the abilities, the strengths of autistic people, and then provide the supports that are needed in order so that we can access those abilities.
I just want to make a comment. I looked at one of the questions that came across on the chat across the bottom of the screen about how do you find out what kids' skills are. Usually you can just watch. My art ability showed up around 7 years old. Well, then give the kid art. Okay, getting interested in something like fixing a bicycle or fixing a motorcycle. If the child is around people that do that, then there's the opportunity to see that they might have a talent in that. Then there'll be another child with autism that's more of a word thinker. He's not going to be interested in fixing bicycles or motorbikes. In order to find out what the child is good at or might be able to do for a job, they've got to be exposed to enough stuff. One of the problems we've had in some of our schools is they took out a lot of the hands-on classes like shop and cooking and woodworking, things like that. And then a child has no way of knowing that he would be good with mechanical things. A child has to be exposed to mathematics to find out if he's good at it. And if you have a child that's good at math, then move him ahead into higher math. I'm not suggesting taking an 8-year-old and putting him in high school, but give him the high school math books. Don't make them do the baby stuff. But you've got to expose kids to enough different things so that they can show where skill is or show where interest is. I get asked, how did I end up in the cattle industry? I was exposed to it as a teenager. Another thing that's holding a lot of kids back at home is not learning how to drive. And there are some issues with multitasking. I learned to drive out on a ranch where I was going on 12 kilometers a day of dirt roads where I could learn in a very safe environment before I did traffic. It's going to take longer, but having a good career, driving was essential. No, we need to start out in deserted, empty parking lots at stadiums, places like this, and have a much longer period of time of learning how to operate the vehicle before you do traffic, because there are problems with multitasking. It will take longer to learn, but they need to learn. It took me a little longer to learn how to ride a bicycle. But these are things that we've got to teach, and it just I'm just going to have more practice doing it.
I'm sure all parents are very, very aware. In India, I work with parents and families very closely, and I know that they actually have identified a lot of abilities in the child. It could be that they haven't really called them as abilities. They haven't really, made the connect between those things that they are good at. They know what they are good at, but they may not have made the link between what they're good at and what could be functional. So it's not that they haven't identified it. I see a lot of them identifying it, but the way they might be looking at as of now, it may not be making sense to them as a skill or as a future skill probably. So I think
I took my ability in art and turned it into my work, doing designing. I'll show you some of my drawings right here. Here are some of my drawings, and that's architectural drawing right there. Yes. Get into focus.
Amazing.
But the way I sold the jobs is I showed people my drawings. This is in my book, Thinking in Pictures. So designing buildings, that's something, that I could do. That's a skill other people want. I'm the visual thinker. Another child might be the mathematical thinker, or somebody else gets exposed to somebody taking a bike apart and fixing it, and the child gets interested in that. I know you've got lots of bicycles and you've got lots of motorbikes, and that's a skill that other people need, but you're not going to be able to see the child do the skill if he's not exposed. Now, fixing motorbikes is not for every child, but you don't know unless you expose them to it.
Sure.
That's
I
right,
think
Temple. That's a
you were answering the question by Nina Wag, and I'm really grateful to your answer. And I have a couple of other questions here coming in. And one of the questions says that we know that there is a huge importance of early intervention, but since everybody knows Temple, you as quite keen on subjects of scientific inquiry, one of the question is, what's the new technique overall globally about assessment of the skills or even intervention? What is happening in the world as something that is more recent?
Well, when you look at what teachers actually do, they make new names for different therapies. But when you watch a teacher, a good teacher, actually work with a child, they do the same things. You have to engage the child. I can't emphasize enough the importance of turn taking. Child has to learn how to wait and take turns. That was a very important part of my therapy. But there are certain teachers, I'm talking here about 3-year-olds that are not talking. There's certain teachers that have the natural ability to engage these children. I think it's a natural ability that some teachers have, and they can get the child doing things. And there's all kinds of discussions about different types of therapy. Now, the thing you got to be careful about is not driving a child into sensory overload. Some kids you can push harder. You got to push a little bit. Others, you got to be very gentle and work with them in a very quiet place. Otherwise, the sensory system will just completely shut down. And a good teacher sort of just knows how much you can push. You push too hard, you're going to get screaming and temper tantrums and a meltdown. Too much noise actually causes pain and causes fear. But the thing I want to look at, because I know resources are limited in a lot of these countries, is that you get the right grandmother. She can make a really good program with 3-year-old kids. And then when the kid gets older and there's some guy fixing a bicycle or fixing a motorbike, you see if the kid's going to be interested in that. Or you see art skill or music skill or math skill, then develop it. The skills will always be uneven. Good at one thing, bad at something else. That tends to be the pattern. But I want to figure out what can this child do when he grows up. And kids that can fix things, there are going to be plenty of jobs in Bangladesh and India for kids that are good at fixing things.
Yeah. Yes, of course. And one of the question is for you, Stephen, is that during this pandemic, if you have realized we all know what the challenges are. The children are being taught mostly by the online platforms, and even if they are supposed to go to the school, probably they will be wearing masks to go to the school. Having thought of or having received all such challenges from children around the world, what has been your summary about how are we best managing these challenges?
Well, there are 3 things that come to mind. The first is maintaining one's schedule. We need our schedules, autistic and otherwise. Keep the schedules the same as much as possible. However, there will be changes by nature of the pandemic. And then we keep those changes as similar to what we have as we can. So that's the first thing. The second thing is communication. We need to communicate in the best way the person understands, whether it's by spoken word like we're talking now, whether it's using a picture schedule or a picture word schedule. So here's an example. We have an 8-year-old who is now home from school. That's with getting their education at home. So maybe they don't speak very much. They've got limited speaking ability, and they have these pictures all around the house that remind the child, of their schedule, all the routines that they go through when they get up in the morning, breakfast, brushing their teeth, and so on. All of that remains the same. However, instead of taking the bus, so however you get to school at 8:30, that part of the schedule, the picture of a school bus, is now replaced by a picture of, say, a desk where learning is taking place at home. It might be in a separate room, or it might be in a specific corner of a room. This is where learning takes place. And so now the child goes from wherever they are, maybe the kitchen, maybe from watching TV, to that learning place in the home. And schools certainly have their schedules. And if a parent has questions as to what the school schedule is, they should contact their teacher, the student's teacher. And schools tend to have some opening procedures, such as taking attendance. And what I've seen in some schools is that there'll be an opening circle, everybody's sitting on the floor, but they could be at their desks. And each person their name is called out and recognized. Is Manish here today? Yes, we recognize Manish. Then Manish takes his picture that's Velcroed to a picture of home, rips it off with a nice satisfying tear, and puts it onto a picture of school. Well, could that be duplicated at home, where we take the picture of the child from their bedroom or wherever they happen to be before they go to school, and then a picture of the desk or the place at home where they're learning. And then there's usually a snack in the middle of the morning, so let's schedule that in. Whatever classes that need to be studied, we schedule that in as well, and take it through the rest of the school day until it's time to leave school and go back to home. So it's maintenance of scheduling is number one. Number two, communication in the best way the autistic person understands. Number three, for you parents, self-care. You've got to take care of yourself so that you have the energy and ability to take care of your kids and to provide those supports. So back when we were flying on airplanes, there'd always be a safety announcement to put on your own oxygen mask first before helping somebody else, because if you don't, you're going to pass out and you won't be available to help somebody else.
Yes.
So certainly in Bangladesh, there's plenty of opportunities for parents to take a very, very quick yoga type breaks, maybe even just a minute, whether it's just taking deep breaths in, thinking about inhaling calm from the environment and exhaling stress, or perhaps even on the inhale, you make a fist like this, and when you exhale, you stretch out your hands like that. Do that a few times. You're going to be relaxed. And you can even do the same thing where you breathe in, press your hands together, and when you breathe out, you pull them apart. So these are just some things, those three areas that immediately come to mind for supporting students on the autism spectrum during this pandemic.
Great, Stephen. Temple, your autobiographical and your story has been so inspiring. You are just like a mentor for all the parents here in this country, in Bangladesh. There are a lot of viewers from Singapore as well. There's a question about you. I found very interesting that one of the educators have asked that what could have been different in your peers, in your teachers, in your childhood days. What they would have understood better? What could have been different in their understanding that you hoped, that you wished was there in your childhood?
Well, the main thing when I was really little, nobody understood sensory issues. That was probably the biggest thing. Now, I want to answer two questions I saw come across on the text.
Sure, please.
The first question involved language. Why do you have language problems? Well, there's three things that cause language problems, whether it's autism or whether it's some other label. And the first is the child that doesn't hear clearly, even though they're not deaf. I mentioned before that when Adults talked quickly. It was a blah, 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 and I couldn't hear what they were saying. That's why it's important to slow down. That's called auditory processing disorder.
Yeah.
And you have a child that never learns to talk, but he might make sounds where he makes the vowel sounds. Like, for example, for the word food, he might go, ooh, just doing the vowel sounds. So the problem with not hearing incoming speech, even though they're not deaf, there's two different things. Deafness, when they measure for deafness, that's auditory threshold. That's the ability to hear a faint sound. Auditory processing, you're not hearing the detail of the sounds of words. Okay, another problem is expressive. I had problems with this, getting my language out. It was like a big stutter. I knew what I wanted to say, but I couldn't get it out. So you've got to hear it clearly, or you can't get it out. That's two things. The third thing is the kid that repeats everything. In other words, they may memorize an entire movie script, but they have absolutely no idea what the movie script means. So they're speaking nice, clear language. So what you might want to do is get some phrases from that movie and work them back into the real world. So they will start to use it. They can see that language is useful. You see, they're just repeating it back. They don't know what it means. So those are the three ways that language can be messed up. There was another question on that I got to answer. That was about a child that's showing talent and ability in computer coding and programming. But,
Okay.
but he's getting problems with not being able to do the rest of the school curriculum. Well, one of the advantages of the computer industry, it's what's called a no academic barrier of entry industry. Industry I went into with livestock, it's the same thing. And if you're a really good coder and you show your portfolio to a computer company of some of the code you've written, they'll hire you. They'll do that in the US, they'll do that in India. You might want to start a LinkedIn page or some other page to go in a computer forum and start showing some of your code off. And you could go right straight into a job. That's one advantage you've got in the computer industry, is it's an industry where you can sell your work by showing a portfolio. That's the way I sold jobs. I simply showed people my drawings. I showed them photographs of things I designed, and people became interested in that. Stephen Shore, when he started out, as soon as people found out he could fix bicycles, yep, people come to him. That's a skill that people want. So, that's, if the kid's super good at coding, I would just develop the coding and try to get him do some freelance coding. When you get good at doing it, you're gonna get hired. There's a lot of back doors into good jobs in the U.S., and I think this is probably true in your countries too. Half of all really decent jobs, professional level decent jobs, are through the back door. You get them through, somebody that knows somebody that works at a company, and that gets you in. Now, there's a scene in the HBO movie where I go up and I get the editor's card, because I knew if I wrote for this particular farm magazine, that would help my career. I saw that as an entry. That's a very important scene where I get the card. And a lot of people don't see these doors. I can't do algebra at all, but I've done a lot of engineering work. And one of the reasons I did it in the livestock industry is I didn't have to have an engineering degree. And I talked to a mom, see, my mind thinks in specific examples. They're building these big warehouses now. They have them all over the place for online buying. They call them fulfillment centers, all full of conveyors, all full of mechanical equipment. And I had a kid who was a genius at fixing things, but he couldn't graduate from high school. I said, what do you do? I said, you get a job in that Amazon warehouse. Now you work your butt off, working every job in there. Then you start to fix stuff. You know what you could do 15 years later? Design the new warehouse. I have seen that career path in my industry, where somebody comes in, they get jobs on the line, and then they end up in the maintenance shop, and then they end up designing the new plant addition. I have seen that career path. I call it the back door. and a lot of times people don't see it. You know, the front door is doing it the education route, but there's also a back door. But you better be ready to work hard. You can't walk into that warehouse and just start telling them how to build stuff. You better do every job in that warehouse and do it well. You got to work your butt off. Then when something breaks in there and you fix it, then you're the hero.
Sure. Thank you for picking up.
I look at that. I drive by those warehouses and I'm thinking, what if I was a kid today and I couldn't graduate from high school? I'd go right straight to one of those fulfillment centers. That's where I'd go. My goal would be to design in the future, 15 years from now, I'm designing the next fulfillment center. That's what I would do.
Sure. Thank you for picking up those questions by Dorita and Anamika Singupta. Another parent, Manisha Acharya Padi, has asked about, and any of you could answer this, whoever can throw some light on about that. We see a lot of behavior problems actually increasing during this lockdown pandemic. You could say there's a sense of understimulation to children because they are all at home. So if parents see a relative increase in the behavior issues, what could you suggest them? Any of you?
Well, okay, I'll just make it real quick. Get myself on a schedule. I got to get up, get dressed for work. Don't be lounging around in your sleepwear. You got to get up in the morning, get dressed for work. And some of these kids might want to look up life on the International Space Station. And one of the things that NASA learned, also the Russian Space Agency learned the same thing with their space stations. You got to be on a schedule. They have a midday meal where everybody eats together. They have scheduled chores, scheduled exercise and work, and then they also have scheduled free time. Got to also have scheduled free time. Because when the first space stations went up, they had a lot of trouble in them. Anger, turning off mission control was one of the things that happened. And people living on these remote research stations like in the Arctic, they learned the same thing. A schedule, people have to have together time, away from each other time. And it isn't easy. And
Sure.
I haven't done any travel since March 12th. I mean, that totally turned my life upside down. So I'm working on writing now. I'm working on a new book on why visual thinking is important.
Another parent, Kavita George, has asked a very good question, and she says that what about those children where the parents are doing too many things? That the parents might be doing a lot of things at the same time in order to, build up the skills that we say that we need to build up all kinds of skills, and they're doing too many things, but they may not have given enough time to develop a particular ability or kind of express the ability from the child. Would there be an advice for that particular thing?
Yeah, I think you've got to slow things down and you've got to observe. So when somebody asks me, what is my autistic child good at? And sometimes an autistic person will ask me, what am I good at? Yeah. And my question, I answer their question with another question.
Okay.
How do they spend most of their time? Or would if you let them do it? Because we tend to spend more time doing things that we like. We tend to be good at the things we like. And it's that observation which will lead us to abilities and strengths. Now, I want to get back to the idea of employment because that's on the mind of a lot of parents as well. And it's important to also keep in mind that there is fulfilling and productive employment for people who are more significantly affected. So for those of us who have difficulty communicating, those of us who need a lot of support in scheduling. And this brings to mind of someone I know of in Florida his special interest is folding freshly laundered clothes out of a dryer. And he folds them quickly, perfect creases, and that's just what he loves to do. And I know so many people who would like help with their laundry. And he would be more than happy to help you with your laundry too. However, you have to pay him to do it. That is his job. And he spends all day in the laundromat folding clothes out of a hot dryer. Now, this is something that would probably bore the daylights out of most people. But for him, he's being fulfilled. He's productive. He's being appreciated for the skills that he's bringing to society. So that's an example of someone who has more significant challenges that can still find fulfilling and productive employment. And as Temple said, you've got to get your work in front of the person who has the ability to hire. So getting back to the bicycles, I knew that somehow I sensed, I didn't have the formal terminology for it, but I knew that getting a job the formal way through the front door just wasn't going to work. So what I did is I got on my bicycle that I built from the ground up, and I made the rounds of all the shops in the area. I'd go into the shop, identify the owner or the manager, and start nerding into my bicycle with the manager. And then after a period of time, I'd ask him for a job. And my bicycle was, you might say, my calling card. It was the physical equivalent of the drawing that Temple showed of her paddle processing mechanics. And so that way, take your work to the people who have the ability to hire. I have my professor job for the same reason at Adelphi University. I presented there a number of times. And then at one point, a professor just came up to me who had seen me many times before saying, "We have an opening in our department. I think you should apply." So I did. And I guess they say the rest is history. And I'm in my 13th year at Adelphi University.
Great. I mean, that's so inspiring. There's one question, especially for Temple, from our another fellow parent, Neha Abir, who has asked about, like you said, about auditory sensitivities and auditory processing also. Her son cries loudly and holds his ears at least once in a day for several years. He has been doing this. So he has been crying loudly as well as holding the ears in order to block away the sound. And probably she hasn't figured out what could be the reason or the way out.
Well, there might be some sounds that you don't hear that aren't that obvious to you, like just hum of a air conditioning equipment, some electronic sound. Like I find if I use my phone right here, it makes the speaker make static. You know, a lot of people wouldn't notice that, but you have to just watch and observe, when does he plug his ears, and then try to figure out what's causing it. And it could be something that most people don't pay attention to. Right here where I live, when the trash trucks go by, they're really loud. A lot of people don't even notice them. I notice them now because I got to turn my mic off when the trash truck is going by. It doesn't bother me, but I know it's going to bother other people. But there's something he's reacting to. Now, if he's holding his ears all the time, then he's just holding them all the time because he's afraid there's going to be a sound. And if he's doing this all the time, the problem is it's going to make his brain more sensitive to the sounds. You see, that's the worst thing you can do. You see, and I've seen people do that with headphones. They wear them all the time. Now, I think it's important for them to have the headphone with them. This gives them control. But then you want to encourage to only wear it when you really need it. But you can always have them with you. But if he only holds his ears occasionally, then there's something he's reacting to. And there's a lot of electronic hums and things with electronic equipment that maybe he's picking up on that. You see, I'd just have to start asking questions. Where is he located in the house where he does this? Yeah. There's a lot of questions that I'd have to ask. And then I'd start visualizing. Is he out at the marketplace when he does this? You know, is it cars honking the horns? I don't know. But if he holds them just only sometimes, something is causing that. Then if it's something that you could possibly control, let's say some electronic sound that you can turn on and off.
The white noise, probably.
Start controlling that sound. But first of all, you got to figure out what it is.
Yeah, sure. We have another fellow parents, Shubhra Gupta and Madhusudan Srinivas, who are a firm believer that their son, who is 27-year-old, can actually get a lot of benefit by the hug machine that is so commonly associated with you, and you being the invented that. what we want to know is if we have to have an access to a hug machine, how can we? Is that something that is still possible? Is it available in any form?
Well,
Whether
it is. You can buy it online from the Therafin Corporation. It's extremely expensive. There are drawings online. It's not simple to build. Use keyword squeeze machine to find, type in drawings, squeeze machine. But there's other ways to do deep pressure that cost a lot less money, like rolling up in carpet or wearing a weighted vest. You can do these other things. Some people like tight garments, like leggings that are tight, or ballet leotards that are tight, or bicycle shirts that are tight. And these are things that are easy to get. And I'd recommend, doing these easy sorts of things, doing that first.
Oh, yes, yes, of course. I mean, we have been using deep pressure and squeezing in all our occupational therapy sessions. We are very big on a deep pressure. We call it a deep pressure program.
Okay.
Yes, we call it a deep pressure program. We train the parent. We tell them that how much pressure to apply, and it is almost always that the parents usually are too cautious about applying pressure. I have to always teach them that it's not that the child would need a pressure that would be of his age and stature. Their sensory needs can be high enough to actually seek pressure as equal as massaging an adult.
Yeah.
So the intensity of pressure is such.
Well, one thing on a squeezing machine, I could control it. But the problem with the squeeze machine is not simple to build. I mean, it works with an air compressor, and you've got to really have some building skill to build it. And I figured out how to make the air cylinder work and all of that stuff. And there are drawings online for it. Use keyword squeeze machine, not hug machine, squeeze machine. Find the drawings, but they're not simple. You're gonna. Now somebody is really capable of fixing bicycles. They probably could build it, and then get somebody good at carpentry to work with them. It's really important to follow the drawings exactly on things like the sizing of the air cylinder, because you could get too much pressure. There's other ways to do pressure that also work.
Conceptually, it just develops the self-regulation, because the control is with the child.
The kid can control it. See, I could work the controller and control the amount of pressure. When I was a little kid, I couldn't stand people hugging me, and squeeze machine actually helped get me desensitized to that. Again, it gets back to controlling the thing. The other big issue is visual processing sensitivities. There's some kids that when they go to read, they will see the print jiggle on the page. So a really, really simple thing you can do is try printing the schoolwork on different light colored papers, like light gray paper, light lavender paper, really pale colors. Like, for example, in this book right here, I've got, oh, wait a minute, like you can see real pale lavender there. You see, you want to use the pale colored papers, not the dark ones. You could try tan, light lavender, and let the child pick out the paper. I have seen that save school careers. Now on reading, some kids are going to learn phonics. I was a phonics learner. Another kid's going to be a sight word learner. Use the method that works. That's the important thing. I'm still a phonics learner when it comes to spelling words. Sometimes I got to sound them out. And sight words did not work for me. But visual processing problems can be a problem. And then a lot of people that remain nonverbal, they're living in a world where sensory's jumbled. And a really good book is Tito Mukhopadhyay, How Can I Talk If My Lips Don't Move? He's from India. How can I talk if my lips don't move? And he describes jumbled up vision, similar to a bad satellite dish, a bad internet connection, pixelating, buffering, hearing that's cutting in and out. And one of the reasons why nonverbal individuals touch and smell things is because those senses actually still work. Those senses are simpler. The circuitry of the senses is simpler, and they actually still work. And they, Tito, How Can I Talk If My Lips Don't Move? Then there's the book, The Reason I Jump. The best one is the sequel to it, When Noki's Older, the sequel to The Reason I Jump. These are books written by people who type completely independently. Nobody's holding on to their wrist, so we know that they wrote it.
Sure, Stephen. I have I would like to tell both of you that I am so thrilled to get this sensory component and perspective being put in the center of so many things, because I myself, being an occupational therapist, I use sensory integration as a therapy, as an intervention, day in and day out. So you cannot imagine how thrilled I am to see how both of you, being on the spectrum, having seen all the challenges, have such a recognition, such an appreciation for the fact that the sensory issues could be the key thing here. Having said that, there's a question by Dr. Sujata Misal, and she says that if there is someone who is 20-year-old and he has obsession towards smelling pillows, and also something about affinity for certain specific people because they might speak a particular language. So there are two things there. One is smelling as a sensory, probably, but in a 20-year-old, and also about liking only few people because of the language that they speak. Would you have any suggestions, Stephen?
Yeah, well, one thing that comes to mind is what about the pillow is he smelling? So it's being a bit of a detective, like Temple was talking about earlier, observing. Go a little more deeply into why these things are occurring, and also why is he attracted to a particular language that's being spoken. And depending upon where that person is developmentally, that can lead to possibilities related to perhaps perfume, maybe something else related to pillows or the texture of pillows, or specifically the pillow covers. And likewise with the language, because we tend to have a certain amount of central auditory processing disorder, which scrambles things, he may find it easier to hear the sounds of a particular language over another.
That's good.
And does that lead towards a possible interest in studying languages, linguistics, for example? There was another question, and it's somewhat related, that was asked about managing self-regulatory behavior or self-stimulatory behavior.
Yeah.
And I like that question because it did reframe self-stimulatory behavior as self-regulatory behavior. Now, everybody engages in self-regulatory behavior. For non-autistic people, it tends to be bouncing a leg or doodling or twirling your hair or biting the end of your pen. And if you ask somebody, why do they do that? Often they'll say, I didn't realize I was doing that. But now that I think about it, it helps me concentrate. Because what they're doing is they're maximizing the ability of their brain to focus on whatever needs to be focused on. Now, since us autistic people tend to be more dysregulated, the attempts to regulate are going to be bigger. And it may involve various stereotypical activities such as flapping one's hands. Now, hand flapping, there's nothing wrong with hand flapping. All you have to do is watch The Price is Right. And you'll see when contestants are called down to the front, they run down and scream and flap their hands, and it's quite appropriate. However, it's important to realize that maybe flapping one's hand is inappropriate and it's disruptive in a particular situation.
Yeah.
So if I had a child in my class who was flapping their hands and it was disruptive, what I would do is I'd go to them and say, here, squeeze this, and hand them a therapy ball or a squeeze ball. Because this self-regulatory behavior is going to happen whether you like it or not. You can't stop it. So saying quiet hands, hands down, something else is going to pop out. And whatever that other thing that's going to pop out is probably going to be more disruptive and more difficult to deal with. So provide something else that suits that need, that fulfills the need. It could be squeezing a ball. It could be sticking Velcro underneath a desk where a child can run their hands across the smooth side or the soft side and the rough side. It could be putting those big rubber bands between the front legs of a chair, and the child kind of kicks those bands back and forth if they're moving their feet around a lot in order to self-regulate. So that is what comes to mind in terms of managing self-stimulatory, or I like to think of it more as self-regulatory behavior. That sensory piece is huge. I have a number of sensory issues. I notice sounds that other people don't. There are people's homes that I just end up, there's a particular friend of mine at the university where she has this really noisy lighting fixture. So when I go to her home, I unscrew the floodlight because that thing is buzzing like nobody's business, and I just got to take it out because it's too disruptive. A ticking clock is another horrible distractor for me. If there's one of them in a room that I'm in, the batteries come out right away or the clock just gets removed. My wife and I have such a clock. She uses it to time her practice sessions, and she'll leave that blasted thing out on the table. And I come home and it's ticking, so I close it up and I shove it under the chair cushion. And then I'm gone, and she gets home. When I return, she's mad because she can't find the clock. Where is it? And I tell her, well, it's under the chair cushion. Doesn't everybody put their clock there?
Sure.
So the sensory piece.
Temple, I'm going to combine two questions of 2-3 people here, Ishrat, Munmun, and there are some few other people who have. I'm just joining the thoughts together. And this question is also from Marufa Jabin. It's about how do we teach emotions to children, one, and how do we teach them regulation of these emotions?
Well, I definitely have emotions. When other kids bullied me, I got really upset. And the only places I was not bullied when I was in high school was shared interests. When it gets to bullying, let's get them involved with something that was a shared interest. One of the shared interests for me was building electronic kits. Okay, that was something that, other kids did that. It was a shared interest. The problem I had is that I don't pick up the subtle facial things. I know if somebody's angry or somebody's sad or laughing their head off, but the very subtle things that maybe I've told the same story like 5 times about the same carnival ride and people are sick of it. So I kind of have some rules. I can tell that story about the carnival ride twice and then that's it. But I basically have to learn, sort of like a rule-based system. I'm really, really good at business social. I know how to do that. When it comes to business stuff and things like that I totally understand. And I have a book called Different Not Less, where 16 people that got diagnosed later in life described their experiences. These people all had good careers, but where they had problems was with their relationships. And then when they got diagnosed, then that helped the spouse to understand why they didn't understand certain things. And there's certain complex emotional stuff that I still don't understand. Be out on a job and I go, engineering's easy. It's the people problems that are hard. It's easy to figure out how to design the equipment, get them to operate it right. That's the hard part. And I'm definitely the geek mind. And I think the first thing is people have to understand that people think differently. Like when SpaceX went up to the space station, I totally geeked out. I watched 2.5 hours of live broadcasts of the docking. Most people would not. 2.5 hours, completely geeking out and laughing at where the automatic captioning thing called food puppies. I'm laughing about that. That's total geek out experience. And so I get happy and excited about stuff like the SpaceX going to the space station. Other people get happy about that too, but not the same way. Their emotional life is more relationships with other people. And I had a wife come up to me at airport one time and said that my book, Thinking in Pictures, helped her to understand her engineer husband and saved their marriage. But But basically, I just have to learn. You learn to be polite. But there's a certain kind of emotional world that I'm not really in. This is why I put so much emphasis on career, because career has made life worthwhile. Now, one thing that's very worthwhile to me doing a program like this is when I get emails sent to templegrandin.com that, oh, I'm driving a car now because of you, or the colored paper really helped. Something that I recommended really helped a kid go out and get a job, get out, and have a life. That gives me satisfaction, especially now that I'm 73 years old, way past retirement age. I'm still working but I get great satisfaction if something I recommend on this show helps a kid out there to have a better life. I get big emotional satisfaction out of that. And I've taken some of these emails I've gotten and I've put them up on my wall because that's something that I get satisfaction from. And I realized what a geek I was from sitting right here at this computer, 2.5 hours of live docking broadcast. Watch the whole thing. Watched them open the hatch in the space station, and one of the astronauts got really emotional, the older astronaut, and he pulled his polo shirt up and he turned to the wall and he was crying when he came into the space station. He tried to hide it, but I saw it. And I can totally relate to that. That's it's like I am what I do. And right now, one of the things that I do is helping people to help these kids develop their potential and do everything they can do. Let's go back to the nonverbals. There's we have a guy named Jim Ball. He's an autism specialist, and he worked with a guy, nonverbal, who was an institution, and he taught this guy how to make coffee at the local little gas station store. And that gave him meaning in life. He was the coffee man. And he was appreciated for making nice coffee. And he always cleaned out the coffee machine. And then it was like the folding of laundry. It gave him a skill that other people appreciated. And then finally, when he went to a nursing home, he still served the coffee. That gave his life meaning. This was somebody that was nonverbal that had been in an institution. And people appreciated his coffee.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think today's major themes today of the conversations has been around from the parent side, has been around from the sensory and self-regulation. And we have heard from Stephen a little bit ideas about self-regulation and sensory and stimming. One of our fellow parents, Ruma Chaturvedi, has asked, and I would like to know a little bit on the same themes from you, Temple, since we already heard from Stephen great ideas about how can a child or how can we teach our growing children a sense of self-regulation, especially over their stimming behaviors.
Well, I had places I was allowed to do stimming behavior. I was allowed to do it after lunch, and there was a brass plate that covered up a bolt on the bed frame, and I would spin it around and around and around. And then other places I was not allowed to do it. Some kids are going to need more sensory breaks, so then you schedule them certain times, because stimming calms down the nervous system. But the problem is, if I'd been allowed to do it all day, I would have shut out the world. See, that's the problem. I can remember getting on the swing and winding up the swing and spinning. And it was almost like taking a drug. I completely tuned out. So doing a little bit of that's fine. Then there's other times, I'd be at the airport and I just had, too much airport. I just wanted to sit down, zone out, and look at a magazine. And then I could just shut the airport out. My sensory issues are milder than Steve's are. Ticking clock, I can pretty well ignore that. And then that other kid that the mom was talking about, maybe it was, maybe it's a light fixture that's bothering him. So he's in that particular room. Most people don't notice that it's buzzing. I can't stand dripping water. Staying in a hotel and they've got dripping water, I'll go put a towel in the sink so I don't hear it because I can't sleep.
Sure. Sure. And I have a question coming from a very prominent person in associated with ICDDR. He's the director of the technical training unit. And his question is about how can we, and this question is to both of you, how can we bridge the economy, the safety and security during this COVID-19 pandemic? There needs to be a balance between all these things, especially relating to population of children with the developmental difficulties. How can we make sure that there's a balance between what we want to do with children? We want to do more with them, but we still are very concerned about how can we maintain the balance.
Well, what's happening here, and things have not been handled well with the COVID, and every state's trying to muddle their way through it, is families are forming what they call pods. We have one right across the street now. There's 3 families, and they have young boys, and they get together, and the boys were playing with scooters just right out in front of where I live. They've formed a quarantine pod, and people are doing that with, for education too. There might be 3 families, parents are working, and they take turns running the school. They'll have the kids together like in one house, and 2 or 3 families, and they're just making their own little schools. That's happening right now. They call it pods because they can't get what they need from the school, and parents want to have their kids educated. And the mom is working and trying to educate the kids, and this takes some of the strain off. Sometimes they'll even pay a teacher to come in, and then the people that are in that pod have to be very careful to not go to parties and bars where they bring COVID back into the pod. I've kind of formed a pod with my students, my 4 graduate students. One of them just got married, really great. She kind of had to be quarantined for a little while. We were just talking about, well, how many germs are going to be in the grad office. I was suggesting let's try to stay out of there. But forming groups where I think it's great what the families next door are doing, because now these little boys are getting a chance to play with other children. And people have just had to do this on their own. That's happening right here, right now, across the street from where I live. And it's just something that the parents did. There's a Facebook page now where you can get on in the US and figure out in your town who you could pod with. Most of ours, they're close together neighbors.
And Stephen, few of our parents, Rohini Subramaniam Katiyar, and also another parent, Sujata Misal, has asked about how can we teach about puberty, adolescence, stimming their private parts. How can we work with these kind of areas?
All right. Well, these can be very challenging areas. And I think it starts early. It starts early with what I call body literacy. So what that means is helping the child understand and know what the names for the parts of their bodies are, both the formal names and you might say the informal names. With that also comes the education of what I call appropriate and inappropriate touch. Not good or bad touch, but inappropriate or appropriate touch. So a person who is engaging in masturbation, for example, it's not a bad thing to do, but there are places where you do engage in that behavior and there's places where you don't. And one thing that's important is, I believe, to teach that child to engage in this behavior in their bedroom with the door closed. And there's a rule. Before you enter a room with a closed door, you have to knock. The child has to follow that rule, and so do the parents. And I wouldn't choose the bedroom as a place to I wouldn't choose a bathroom as a place to masturbate, because there may be problems with generalization. Well, if I can engage in this activity at home, maybe I could do that at my grandparents' home, or maybe at the bus station. And of course, we can't do that. So one way to think of it is there's a time and there's a place, and teaching that time and place to engage in these activities. I know I've been seeing many questions from parents, and an organization that's helpful, it's a new organization, is called LearnAutism.com. And I'm involved with that organization, and what we do is we're building a library of, you might say, bite-sized videos that are research-based, but are presented in a way that's accessible to parents and educators and others who are supporting autistic individuals. And especially during times of pandemic, that responsibility is going to fall to the parents and to people who engage in pods, just like Temple talked about. And that's something that's becoming popular in the United States. A small group of parents get together, their resources, perhaps they hire a teacher. And like Temple suggested with her graduate students, there's a lot of conversation as to where these parents go. I heard a story about a member of a pod who wanted to go to Disney World. And the others in the pod said, well, it's fine if you go, but do you realize that you're going to have to quarantine for 2 weeks after you get back and return to the pod?
Yeah.
And the parents then decided, well, maybe we need to visit Disney World another time.
Another time, yes. Yes, that's great. That's amazing. In fact, like we are anyhow discussing a lot about sensory self-regulation, sexual behavior, so stimming private parts. I wanted to share with both of you and also with all the viewers that along with Faith Bangladesh and Soch India, we are actually doing a lot of online consultations where I am giving them some services to understand the sensory needs if they have something specific, some solutions or home-based programs for it. In fact, I have also included under the interventions is like, if a child has stimulating their private parts kind of a thing, but at a younger age, then probably he's doing more because of the sensory input from there. Probably he's doing it more for the sake of it rather than really with the adolescent and puberty, which hasn't really set in. So, and it is all evident in young children. So we are offering quite a bit of online support to all the parents, and they can actually take up they can actually book a slot and consult about the sensory issues, about self-regulation, and also about deep pressure programs that we offer them through the parent given to the child at home itself. So we will continue, and the next question, Temple, is about a little bit about the scientific inquiry again. And this is a question about, can we have if we can do a research, is that something that you look at as a feasibility, that autism children, since there are a lot of visual learners are around, can there be a research to prove that these visual learners can actually go up to a stage of taking up some vocations like designing, graphic designing, any kind of those kind of vocations? Is there a research already, or would you say there's a scope for it?
There's research in my book, The Autistic Brain, about different kinds of thinking. The object visualizer that would be me, and the visual spatial mathematical visualizer. There's a bunch of research, and then if you look at the citations for the papers that are in the autistic brain, you can find more research. Now, my kind of mind does art, graphics, and mechanical things, building mechanical things, fixing mechanical things. When I was out in the field on construction, I worked with machinery designers, welders, and drafting people. So I'm going to guess that 20% of the people I worked with professionally in construction in the 80s and 90s were either autistic, dyslexic, or ADHD. And I am saying that absolutely, totally seriously. And one of the things for two of the people I worked with, a welding class in high school. Another person, a drafting and drawing class in high school. Mm-hmm. And they went right into construction trades and skilled trades, electricians, plumbers, welders, carpenters, A lot of those trades are done by my kind of thinker who cannot do algebra. And I just gave a talk to the honors students last night, and I discussed how there's skills that are getting lost. You see, Europe, they still keep the skilled trades. We're importing food processing equipment right now from high wage countries because we have lost the ability to build this equipment. And it goes back to the schools taking the skilled trades out, like welding, metal shop, taking that out 25 years ago. So we're importing in the 100 shipping containers an entire food processing plant. I think that's very, very serious. And we need the visual thinkers. We can't do algebra. And then what's happening on building a food processing plant is the degreed engineer does the buildings, he does the boilers and refrigeration and builds the building, the more mathematical parts of it. But there's all the clever equipment. Think about really clever packaging machines. Those come out of the mind of the guy who's really weird working in the shop. You look inside your printer, yes, like my printer broke, one little tiny roller, a lot of little fragile plastic parts, and the inside of the printer is really complicated. That's the kind of thing that a visual thinker makes. Okay, the chemistry in the cartridge, that's made by the degreed engineer. The paper feed thing, that comes out of somebody with my kind of mind. See, this is where in engineering, well, I don't care if it's computer printers or it's food processing equipment, or it's the conveyor systems inside like an Amazon warehouse. And a lot of that's coming out of Germany now. And you want the best automated warehouse, it's coming out of England. I've been shopping online for this stuff because I'm seeing too many kids shunted into special ed. And they ought to be designing automated warehouses or container ship docks, things like that. They ought to be designing this stuff. That's a big thing. That's my big push right now. Also, I want to answer quickly a question about diets came up. I saw that. And autism, I cannot emphasize enough how variable it is. You're going from Einstein was probably autistic, Edison was probably autistic, Steve Jobs had some autistic traits. You look at the other heads of tech companies testifying in Congress. Those are fun videos to watch. I'll leave it up to you what you think. So you've got this big spectrum that goes from Silicon Valley head of a company to somebody who cannot dress themselves, and it's got the same name. Now on the diets, there are some people that are helped by diets and others that are not. It's extremely variable. It's most likely to help the kid that's got some gastrointestinal issues. And there is research that shows very clearly that gastrointestinal issues and autism tend to go together. So there's some kids where you take dairy products, milk products out of the diet, it is helpful. Or you take wheat. Now, fortunately, you're in a country where you eat rice, and rice tends to not have the problems. So taking the gluten out, which would be in wheat, that's easy in your countries. But dairy would be in your diets, and some kids it helps take the dairy out. Others it doesn't, so you can try these things. Now, somebody asked you, what about the engineers, a visual thinker? Where do they fit in? The visual thinking engineer designs the clever paper feed mechanism inside a big printer, for example. I'm just going to give examples. Designs a very clever machine for making ice cream novelties, or makes a very clever machine that makes cookies with chocolate swirls in them. And when you look at these machines, they are extremely clever how they are made. And then there's other kinds of equipment like some high-tech pump. That tends to be more likely to be made by the more mathematically inclined. But there's a whole part of engineering I call the clever engineering department. The visual thinker can fix anything. You hand him a motorbike, doesn't matter what kind it is, he'll fix it for you, or make a part to fix it. There's kind of two parts of engineering, and the visual thinking side doesn't get enough credit. I've been in buildings where the PhD in engineering got the fancy office in the tower, and the visual thinkers get a service tunnel with cable trays in the ceiling. There's a particular building, I'm not going to say where it is in the US, that when I look at it, I get mad. It's a beautiful building, and our department doesn't belong in the basement of the cable trays. I have worked on projects for major food companies all around the world, and you need the different kinds of mines. I went into a research lab, this was about 10 years ago, for fish factory. And some guy had made the most fantastic lab equipment for research on fish with things he just bought at the local plumbing store and lumber yard. I found out he was the janitor and the maintenance man, and he had built all this stuff. It's not given enough credit. There's a guy that makes devices that deploy satellites. This guy almost flunked out of engineering school. He got C's as in Charlie in math. You know what he makes? When a rocket goes up with a satellite, whether it's a communication satellite, a Google Earth satellite, a spy satellite, whatever it is, when the rocket gets up there and the nose cone comes off, the satellite has to deploy. And if the satellite doesn't leave the rocket, the whole mission's lost. He makes the thing that makes the satellite come out of the rocket. And he copies things like, you know, when you push the button in the trunk of your car or the boot of your car opens. Yep. He copied the mechanism for a trunk of a boot of a car opening to make a thing to make satellites deploy. That's visual thinking.
Yeah, it's amazing.
List of clients, and this is the guy that almost failed engineering school. You see, he could do just enough math to get through, and he makes these things. He has a fairly small shop. He gave me a video tour of his shop. You know, a lot of high-tech metals. He's got one I call the golden milk crate. That's probably where the idea came from. These things are extremely reliable in terms of making that satellite come out of the rocket. Whole mission fails.
Yeah.
His device doesn't work. And that's visual thinking. It's part of engineering. And you need the math part. Like my kind of mind, we don't do refrigeration boilers. We don't touch that stuff. We don't understand it. That requires the mathematicians. But the next time when your printer breaks or your big copier breaks, go look at inside all that stuff. That's the clever engineering department. Take something over. Somebody had to make that in a machine shop. It doesn't get given enough credit.
It's an eye opener, really. And thank you for taking up that question by Dipali Di Mello. I understand that she told me that she would actually be participating and watching this program along with her son, who has actually completed his engineering degree, and he's on the spectrum, and that's why she did ask you this specific question.
And that's he completed his engineering, but you're going to have some guy in the shop that's making parts like for the Mars rover. Give that person in that machine shop the credit they deserve. Now, at least in my industry, everybody has a horrible office over the boiler room with a floor that shakes. They put everybody in there.
Sure. I have to ask this question by another fellow parent, Suja, who is asking, do either of you, Mr. Shore or Miss Grandin, have anxiety? And how do you deal with it? I think it's a very important question.
I take antidepressant medication. I have been on it since my early 30s. It is completely described in my book of Thinking in Pictures. There's a chapter called A Believer in Biochemistry. Even though that chapter is old, the information is still accurate. The drugs have not changed that much. The mistake that gets made when you use antidepressants for anxiety is too high a dose. Oftentimes, all the Prozac you'll need or all the Zoloft you'll need is a starter dose. Maybe even half of a starter dose. Antidepressants saved me. And I've worked with other visual thinkers where they were able to get off of drugs and alcohol and all kinds of problems with a low dose of antidepressants. Another thing that really helped me is vigorous exercise. I do 100 sit-ups every day. It took me over 6 months to work up to that. I started out with like 2. And that short burst of hard exercise does more good than just walking. Like walking through the airport doesn't do it. Burst of hard exercise. And if I don't do it, I don't sleep. And so those are the 2 things I've done, because my anxiety was biological. When puberty came, I started having horrible panic attacks. So those are the two things that I did.
What about you, Stephen? Would you like to throw some light?
Yeah, certainly. I haven't had to take any medication for autism-related or anxiety-related types of things. However, as Temple says, it's that vigorous exercise that is vital, that releases those endorphins. And so for me, that exercise is bicycling. And perhaps that is why I was so interested in bicycles, at least in part. Well, now with the pandemic, we're kind of locked at home. So under the category of keeping things the same as much as possible, I now make sure that I run on my elliptical bicycle at least once every other day. And I do it for about 90 minutes. I put on the TV, I catch up with the news, and I run on that elliptical bike. It registers about 13 or 1400 calories by the time I'm done. I have no idea if that's a true figure or not. It doesn't matter. But that's how I get my exercise on the off days. Then, like what Temple does, it's sit-ups and other related type of exercise to strengthen my core and to keep my back muscles strong.
Well, there's a question here that's to me about what my mother did when I was young. I had the very good speech therapy when I was young. And then after I started to talk, I got mainstreamed into a small kindergarten class, old-fashioned 50s. You got to remember, in the 50s, when I was a child, social skills were taught to all children in a much more structured manner. You were taught to say please and thank you. Like if I forgot to say please, Mother would say, you forgot to say please or thank you. We'd be sitting at the dining room table, and if I reached across to get the rice, Mother would say, ask your sister to pass it. She'd give me the instruction. She didn't scream no if I reached across the table. She'd give me the instruction. Really, really important. And if I went over to the next door neighbor's house to go play games with their daughter, and we had lunch at the Woods house, Mrs. Wood also corrected. In the 50s, grown-ups everywhere in shops corrected little kids. And manners were just taught in a much more structured way. Another thing that we did in our neighborhood, when you were about 7 and the parents had a party, we had to put on our good clothes, greet the guests, never call them by the first names. It was Mr. and Mrs. Wood. We knew their first names. We weren't allowed to use them. But you had to shake hands with the guests, serve them as snacks. That taught social skills. And then also kids had paper routes at really young age. And Steve had a paper route. These are things that really helped my ability. And art was always encouraged. Mother had a very good sense of just how much to stretch me. You know, there's a tendency to over-shoulder kids. You got to stretch just outside the comfort zone. And you don't push them into stuff where they're going to go into sensory overload, but you give some choices. When I had the opportunity to visit my aunt's ranch when I was 15, I was afraid to go. Mother gave me a choice. I could go for a week or I could go all summer. Not going wasn't the choice. Once I got out there, I loved it. And you've got to, stretch kids, give them some choices. The issue came up about wearing masks. Well, there's a lot of different masks. Let the kid have some choices. You're going to wear one, but you're going to have some choices. There's fun ones with all kinds of fun pictures on them. There's very soft ones. There's stiff ones. Let them have some choice. Okay, difficulty making friends. That's going to be shared interests. Okay, maybe you play chess together. I used to ride horses with another kid. Or maybe you do play, you're in a choir, or you're in an orchestra doing something with music, or you do woodworking projects together. Something where there's a shared interest. Join a book club and we'll discuss books. It could be a lot of different things.
Thank you, Stephen and Temple. We have actually taken couple of minutes extra than what we had thought and what we had committed that we would be taking from you. But any last thoughts, any last minute? There are so many wishes for you, Temple and Stephen. There are so many people who have got inspired by you. There is one parent I remember, she has said that it is your book that made my child speak. I think she was referring to thinking of pictures. I
Good.
even if I want to name them, Keshav, Kriti Mitra, Viveka, Dr. Salina Sultana, Sumitra Paul Bakshi. There are endless list of parents, Nupur Tiwari, Mukesh Gupta. There are endless people who would love to be, who love today. They are thrilled. They have so many good wishes for you because you are the one who actually inspired, have made some changes without your books, your research papers, your writings, your YouTube videos. All of them have made so much of a difference in the lives of children here
Well,
that
thank you.
we would be always indebted to you, both of you, in fact, and we would love that we would, if we could be in touch more through similar such programs. Having said that, any last thoughts, Stephen and Temple, from both of you, for all the parents and professional community attending this program to end up the program?
I think important thing to keep in mind, a couple of them. One is autistic people, just like everybody else, is unlimited, and it's up to us to find ways to access that potential. The second thing that comes to mind is that we've discussed the great diversity that we find within the autism spectrum. And the way I think about that is that when you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person.
Well, I want to just say kind of the same thing. You've got a huge diversity. I've worked in a construction engineering type of field where I work professionally, visual thinkers that I know are autistic, with more mathematical engineers that were probably autistic. The kind of technology we are using right now probably had somebody with some autism involved in creating this StreamYard.com that we're using right now.
Great. So for all the viewers, this program will be available on a YouTube link. Anybody who would like to have an access, or if you get an idea from our posts about the YouTube link, that you could definitely visit again on the video, and you can definitely see this kind of in the recorded format for sure. And we would be posting the link online. Our team, our collaborators' strengths, the technological strength of Faith Bangladesh, by under the able leadership of Nilofer Apa Karim and Dr. Aftabuddin, Muhammad Rafiqul Islam, they all would make sure that you have access to the videos anyway, and you will not miss out on the teachings of this great program. Thank you, Temple, once again, and Stephen. You are the one who made sure that this program could happen, and this is one of the most enriching programs that we have ever attended. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was my honor.
Thank you.